Hello, hello. This is Dr. Z. Zachary Brooks with another podcast. I'm here from your favorite local library, or in this case, my favorite local library, with my good friend Goodyear. So this podcast is the first part of a series. Let's say it's the second part of a series after the introduction I did, if you followed along with this. And this is inspired and comes from a series of presentations, a series of lectures I did in October 2018 at a university in Mexico, in Puebla. The university is called La Universidad Popular Autónoma del Estado de Puebla. The shorthand for that is UPAEP, U-P-A-E-P, UPAEP. So it's sort of like, let's say, University of Colorado, they use CU. You know, a lot of these universities, they don't want to say the long name the entire time, so they use a little short name. So University of Colorado goes by CU. Universidad Popular Autónoma del Estado de Puebla goes by UPAEP. Anyway, I did a series of lectures in Mexico, and the first one I did an introduction, and the first one I did is the one I'm going to do today in 3 parts. It's called Intercultural Competence. And with that, let's just get started. And the really good way to learn things sometimes is just by doing. So really soon here we're going to have a series of questions you can ask yourself out loud if you're driving around, just sort of figure it out. And I think in part 2, we're going to have the answers to that. So come back for part 2 to get the answers to the questions we're going to ask in part 1. So Culture, Cognition, and Change is the name of the lecture series I did. And right now, we're definitely in the culture part of it. Oh, some nice little music there. The other way to talk about culture, cognition, and change is called the 3 C's. This is Dr. Z. So intercultural competence, the definition is having the skills and awareness to build relationships across cultures. And we'll talk about distinction between 2 cultures and 3 cultures momentarily. So intercultural competence, having the skills and awareness to build relationships across cultures. There's a lot in that. So before I go to the next slide, just think to yourself, what does culture mean? Obviously, it's between a couple of language and cultures and nations and states, the rest of it. But what about in your own life? What are some of the cultures you see between generations or between business environments, those kind of things? So you can think of cultures in different ways, and I think some of the things apply in different ways. So part 1. So I'm going to have different parts to this. If you can watch this, great. If you're just listening, I'll read them out loud. So part 1, intercultural competence overview. We're going to have quiz 1 questions, analogies of culture, definitions of culture, intercultural space, intercultural competence, skills of an intercultural person, and finally quiz 1 answers. And definitely from this podcast, you'll learn how to say intercultural, because I just said it about 6 times there. So a little bit about me. Let's start off with the most fundamental sort of thing about this. And my philosophy is that questions are the most fundamental human technology. And we think of technology in terms of apps and so forth, but we can also think in terms of technology in terms of doing things differently. And I think, we have language, and language is a tool that humans have, and this one of the things that makes us very distinct is our use of language and our ability to form sounds, and those sounds have meanings, and then structure those sounds and meanings together in absolutely new and infinite ways. It's a really powerful thing. And one of the things about language that's so incredible is forming questions. And we ask new questions, we can actually get new answers. And so in your own life, just think, what if I asked a new question today? And then let your brain do the work. Your brain wants to solve problems, but it needs to have more creative, interesting problems to solve. And the way you get there is through questions. So let's start off with some questions. An intercultural competence 10-part question. So I'll read them out loud in case you're just listening. So question 1. And this comes from the London School Intercultural Quiz. So thank you, London School Intercultural Quiz. You had a free version, and I happily used it. So question 1. Which of the following is considered poor etiquette in Japan? 1. Offering a gift with 2 hands. 2. placing your chopsticks upright in your food. 3, taking off your shoes before entering someone's home. So question 1, which of the following is considered poor etiquette in Japan? Offering a gift with 2 hands, placing your chopsticks upright in your food, taking off your shoes before entering someone's home. That was question 1. On to question 2. There's 10 of these. Excuse me. Question number 2. Which color should you avoid wearing in Brazil? Red, purple, yellow. Question 2. Which color should you avoid wearing in Brazil? Red, purple, yellow. Question number 3. In India, what do vegetarian Hindus typically not eat? Meat, fish, seafood, eggs, and any dairy products. Meat, fish, seafood, and eggs. Or meat, fish, and seafood. I'll number them, then next to them I read them. And number 3, question number 3. In India, what do vegetarian Hindus typically not eat? Number 1, meat, fish, seafood, eggs, and any dairy products. 2, meat, fish, seafood, and eggs. Number 3, meat, fish, and seafood. So which of those is correct? Question number 4. Excuse me, wait, I get some water. Question number 4. In which country is the number 4 considered unlucky? China, Mexico, Iran. In which country is the number 4 considered unlucky? China, Mexico, Iran. That's question number 4. Question number 5. In which country does nodding the head up and down mean no rather than yes? In which country does nodding the head up and down mean no rather than yes? Is it Bulgaria, Russia, or Thailand? Is it Bulgaria, Russia, or Thailand? Question number 6. Which country has the most time zones? Russia, China, or France? Which country has the most time zones? Russia, China, or France? Question number 7. Oh, we're making it through this very, very well. Which of the following is not one of the 5 pillars of the Islamic religion? Hajj, Ramadan, Puja. So number 7, which of the following is not one of the 5 pillars of the Islamic religion? Hajj, Ramadan, Puja. Question number 8. Back to the slide. Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties. Keiji, Mianji, Guanxi. Next slide. Question number 9. Which of the following would you not offer as a gift to a Chinese business partner? A clock, a bottle of wine, or a pen? Which of the following would you not offer as a gift to a Chinese business partner? A clock, a bottle of wine, or a pen? And question number 10. What is the Jewish New Year commonly known as? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Hanukkah. What is the Jewish New Year commonly known as? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Hanukkah. So that's question number 10. Later we'll come back and we'll answer those questions. And I like to teach intercultural competence this way because culture is something that's very much a part of our existence. And sometimes you can learn a concept sort of abstracted outward and learn it that way. But I think with these cultural conversations, it's good to actually have people participate directly in them, which is why I'm doing a quiz early in this presentation. So you can kind of ask yourself, what you know about other cultures. Maybe these questions seem odd. Maybe they're actually too London English-centric. Maybe there's other intercultural quizzes out there that are actually better for a particular culture and so forth. So anyway, next slide, I'm going to share a little bit more about me, which is what I usually do when I give presentations. I kind of sprinkle in some themes and things about my past to students so they kind of get a sense of who I am. And so the next slide, a little bit about me. So this is actually really exciting stuff. I have had an acting career during which I worked in 38 film projects. That's fantastic. I mean, it was really, really cool. But I was not an A-level actor. So that's a problem, like, yeah, I was an actor, but, I was pretty average. That's kind of what it means. So, and I think there's a little picture of me. Yeah, there's a picture of me to prove that I was an actor. I grabbed a screenshot of an actor in which I was kind of a weirdo, and it was a lot of fun to do it, but there you go. Anyway, so back to doing intercultural competence stuff. So defining intercultural competence, we have 5 bullet points or 5 numbers on this slide. So we're going to talk about analogies of culture, definition of culture, definition of intercultural and intercultural space. Number 4, definition of intercultural competence. So we finally, in slide number 19, are going to actually give a real definition of intercultural competence. And number 5, defining the skills of an intercultural person. So if you're driving along or just listening to this, you don't have the visual aid. If you had to draw a picture of culture, what would you draw? If you have the visual aid, what you see in front of you is a hand with a pencil, looks like a pencil in the hand, ready to draw something. That's what this is supposed to symbolize. So you can pause at this point, or you can just think to yourself, do a little thought experiment in your head. If you had to draw a picture of culture, what would you draw? Well, turns out there's a lot of people who have done this, and culture oftentimes is talked about in terms of analogies. It's like something else. That's what an analogy is. It's like something else. So a couple of analogies of culture that are typically that we typically have are an iceberg. And so an iceberg is large piece of ice, rock, floating out in, let's say, near Greenland or something like that. Hopefully there's still icebergs by the time you listen to this. And the analogy goes like this. You can see the pointy part above the water, but really an iceberg is much, much larger. And if you go underneath the water, you have 3 to 4 times the amount of things hidden below the surface than you do above the surface. So if you go to a new country, you hear the language, and you might see some customs, the way people sort of interact with each other. You can see all those things, but what drives a lot of those things is much, much more. So culture is like an iceberg because only some of it is above the water. And what's below the water, so on top, what we can all see are the behaviors, language, those kind of things. Below, we get things such as interpretations and core values, and those are the things that sit very low in this iceberg analogy. So one way to talk about culture is that it's an analogy. It's like an iceberg. You can see only parts of culture, but really culture is much deeper, and it incorporates values and interpretations and so forth. The next analogy of culture might be one of my favorites, honestly, maybe because I feel like this is the analogy of a fish in water. And so we have these 2 bowls, and I like this one because it sort of symbolizes what we're talking about is intercultural competence. If we're in one bowl of water as a fish, I don't know what your fish's name is. Mine could be Fido. It's a dog's name. Well, anyway, I'm not going to go down that track because I don't really know good fish names. If you have a good fish name, just insert it here. I like this one because it symbolizes going from one fish bowl to another, as if you're going to a new culture. And culture is described like a fish bowl because a fish doesn't know it's in water surrounded by glass. You and I can see into the bowl and through the water, and we can see that the fish is in water, but if you're that fish, you might not be able to see outside of that because your whole life is very much incorporated with culture. And so it's really hard to see culture if you're inside of it. And that's one way to think about culture, as culture like a fishbowl. Next one, we see an onion, and you might have heard this one before. This one's pretty good too. So culture is like an onion because you can peel its layers from its products and language. And as you peel these layers, you get to not only just the visible kind of things, but then the things that are less visible, the customs, some language use issues, some values, and so forth. So that's another way to think about culture as an analogy. And the next analogy we have, it's one I haven't heard tons, but actually works pretty well. And we see what we see on the screen, if you're listening, are a pair of eyeglasses, probably prescription. I think that's basically the idea. And so we can say culture is like wearing glasses, because no one can perceive reality as it is or in the same way as others. We cannot help seeing the world through the glasses created by our own culture. What is worse, most of the time, we are not aware we are wearing them. So this is similar to the description we gave with a fish in water in the bowl. The fish is not even aware it's swimming in the water through and seeing things, if it is seeing things or looking that way through the glass. And this is similar, like we have our lenses on and we don't even know we're wearing glasses. You know, it's sort of like in the morning or whenever you're like, where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? And it turns out they're on top of your head. You don't even know you're wearing them sometimes or putting them on top of your head. And that's culture too. And so culture is completely pervasive, but it's so pervasive we just live with it and don't even really reflect on it because it's so much a part of who we are, especially as social human animals. Another analogy of culture, I think this is the last one. I think I just have 5. The picture I put on the visual is just a string of code. I'm not sure which code this is. We have an arrays. We have a few other things. It could be one of a couple different things. If anyone knows, send me information. This is this code, and that would be cool to know. Anyway, so we have a bunch of code in a photograph. And so culture is like software because we operate within the restrictions of the code given to us by our families, schools, and societies. So think, you were born, you grew up in a certain way with certain people and their particular language. You didn't choose that language, you were born into that place, that language, that culture. You went to certain schools because your parents made a series of choices to get you there. So you know, culture is like software because we operate within the restrictions of the things that we're given. So if you talk about game theory and these other things, like you play the game within the rules you're given. You know, don't hate the player, hate the game. You know, you can talk about that. Oh, one more analogy of culture. This one is fairly easy to understand. Analogy of culture is like a plant in a pot. So on the top of the plant with all the beautiful flowers, blooming our institution, right at the base of the top of the soil are the values, and underneath the values are history. So that's another way to think about culture, another analogy. So we had 6 analogies of culture altogether. So a little bit more about me. I worked as a bartender in Spain where I had to use 6 languages to serve customers. Which 6 languages did I use? So I'll repeat it, and you can fast forward if you want at this point, or just bear with me a second. I worked as a bartender in Spain where I had to use 6 languages to serve customers. Which 6 languages did I use to serve the customers in Spain? So the first one, I listed this in Spanish for some reason. I presented this in Mexico. I think that's why I listed the languages in Spanish. It doesn't make sense I would ask the question in English, but I guess I'm just doing some Spanglish, you know. Yo hablo un poco de Spanglish también, como mucha gente en el mundo, especialmente que tiene contacto entre las dos culturas. So, you know, I guess that's why I did it. So, which 6 languages? Castellano, Spanish, Inglés, English, Francés, French, Alemán, German, Italiano. Oh, that one I listed in English. So looks like Dr. Z needs to work on his slides, right? His slide technique's kind of slipping. And number 6 is Catalan. So I lived in the Catalonian region of Spain and north of Barcelona. Barcelona includes Catalonia, but I lived north of there. And so because I was in Catalonia, I had to learn some Catalan to serve some Catalonian customers. It was a really cool experience. It's a fantastic language, as all those other languages are. So 6 languages: Spanish, English, French, German, Italian, and Catalan. So at this point of the conversation, after I've talked a lot about the analogies of culture and so forth, I actually become frustrated with culture. It frustrates me because my analytical mind wants to actually have a definition or measure it or think about it in some systematic way. I mean, analogies are wonderful because they're little mini stories. They help organize our thought around something. But, I can only do so much when thinking about culture as a plant. I actually need something else as well. So this is the end of part 1, and come back for part 2 in just a few minutes. I'll begin recording that one. So I understand culture is complex, but how to study it. Things I always share with my students when I'm starting off a presentation. I always like to say, during my first year in college, I received an F in reading. So if you're not in the United States, an F is basically the worst grade you can receive. I'll repeat, an F is the absolute worst grade you can receive. And so I received an F in reading during my first year in college. I was not a good student. I was, in fact, so bad that I also received an F in writing. So for anyone out there who knows of maybe an 18 or 19-year-old kid who's not very good in college, or if you're an 18 or 19-year-old kid who's not very good in college, there's hope. You can eventually do things that, a little more successful than that beginning I had. So I was not a good student to start off with, but that's the way things are sometimes, and hopefully I've turned things around at this point. So